Lights on. Oh, no, don't. Really fast. On D2L, in our in-class files section, there's this little folder in here. It's a nice little zipped folder called tracking. Go ahead and give that a good old download. It shouldn't take too long at all. For that. And then before we get started, make sure you unzip that from its zipped folder. So let's take a really quick look at your 5x5 splits. This is going to be very similar to what we did last class. We're just going to watch it. If there's any like super big things that you guys need to know about, I'll go ahead and mention them. But if not, then we'll just move on. All right, so let's do. That's nice.
So, I'd like to think I'm a pretty good driver.
Luke sucks at driving.
It's just, sometimes the lights get confusing.
I've seen him run like 3 red lights.
And I think driving can be pretty fun.
That's fun. Only thing I would definitely do is you got a lot of black space at the end. Yeah, this is like a minute. And then it looks like it starts with like there's an extra clip back there. Yeah, I would cut that out. We just got a random chip eating back here. I would just double check that. It's all good. It's all good. That's neat. I like That's cool. The only thing I would definitely take a look at is your resolution's a bit small. But yeah, that's neat. This shot right here. That's nice. I like that. That's good. feels like it's out of the 90s, and I love it. Lucas, you said you want the big one to be played or the little one?
The big one is much better. You can play it there.
Okay, I'll grade your little one then. This one.
So I'd like to think I'm a pretty good driver.
Luke sucks at driving.
It's just, sometimes the lights get confusing.
I've seen him run like 3 red lights.
And I think driving can be pretty fun.
So we went to go eat at Moe's today.
I was going to get Moe's earlier, right?
And he ran 3 stop signs. Oh, I squished my burrito.
And he starts yelling at me about some stop signs.
3 stop signs in a row. And now my burrito's all squished.
There were no stop signs.
And on our way out,
I even looked when we were leaving and they just weren't there.
and he ran them again.
That's fun. That's fun. Hello, Mr. Train. It's good of you to join me today. It's been a minute. How have you been? Good. All right. So just to make sure everyone's got this tracking zip file all nice and downloaded and unzipped. Is there anyone that still needs a second for that? It shouldn't be too big. It should be decently small. Okay. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be playing a little bit more in After Effects because we're going to be doing some camera and video tracking. This train is a big train. So I'm going to go ahead and open up After Effects. It's going to open on the wrong screen. That's okay. There it goes. And I'm not going to worry too much about making a new project. I'm just going to hit this little X here. Because it should automatically default to a new project. Now, if on yours it defaulted to an older project, you do want to do a new project for this exercise. Now, another thing before we get too far into this, all of the notes that I'm actually using to teach this lecture are online for you. So if you get lost, they're right here. I do not have a small video for this one yet. It corrupted. I have to make another one. My power went out. It was no fun. But I will be posting this lecture in class after class today. But if you get lost, there are notes on there for you, just like all the other lectures we've done. It is there. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to import those 2 videos that I gave you, as well as a couple of images that I had saved of my cats on my OneDrive. You can use whatever images you have just on hand For those of you in here, like you can Google search something really fast and just find a picture. Or you don't have to use a picture at all. You can use one of the other videos that we're using in here. So I'm just going to import all of these into my project window, not my composition. So the first one we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at camera tracking. So when you're tracking a camera, there's a couple of reasons you would want to do this. One, maybe you're walking down a hallway and you want to put text on the wall. So you've got your camera and you're following another actor or something like that. So you're just kind of walking and you want to put different things, maybe make the hallway look nice and sci-fi, something like that. This is a really quick way to do that. You can also do all sorts of other little tracking things. Maybe you have a room and you want to kind of pan around it and have different pictures or text pop up at different times, depending on if your camera is looking directly at it or not. This is a good way for that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's take a look at this abandoned building here, or one that says camera track on it. Should look like this. Now, when you're filming for camera tracking, so you're tracking the camera, not an object, you really want to make sure that it's as stable as possible, it's nice and smooth, it's already color corrected, all of those good things before you add your tracking to it. So we've got this clip here. I'm going to hit play here, let it play through a little bit. It's just this nice sloping, gentle camera pan across this brick wall. Nothing too fancy. And what we want to do is we want to track an image, a text, or another video on here, on this wall, so it sticks to the wall as our camera moves. So the first thing we need to do for that is we want to make sure our camera here, our video, is what is selected. And there's a couple of ways you can go about this. You can look up through here and there's a tracking section. But for me, the easiest way to do that is to come over here to this little tracker section right here, this little tracker box. And there's a couple of different things in here. So we already know about the warp stabilizer. In After Effects, you can type in the effect and preset for warp stabilizer, or you can just come over here and click warp stabilizer. There's also the stabilize motion, which is part of that. But we also have track camera and camera motion, or track motion. So what we're going to do is make sure we're at the beginning of our timeline, and we're just going to hit track camera. So this works very similar to that warp stabilizer, as it'll analyze your footage. And over here on the top, this top left, we can see what frame we're currently on, what percentage, and about how long it's going to take, just like that warp stabilizer. So we've got maybe 40 seconds left. From here, you can change what type of shot it is. Is it a fixed angle? Is it a variable zoom? Is there a specific angle you need to use? This fixed angle of view will work pretty much all the time. There's some very specialized times when you might want to change it. You can also show the track as being 3D or 2D. For what we're going to be doing, we'll be using this 3D. And then you can also change the scale of the size of your target and your track points, which we will see in a moment. So it's now solving my camera. Come on. Where's all my dots? There we go. If your dots don't show up, click that create camera right there. So pretty much what this is all of these different colored dots are different points that are trackable in our footage. So they're very hard to see, at least up here on my screen, but on Zoom it might be a little easier to see, but there's a whole bunch of different colored like crosshair X's in here. And then you should have this big target as you scrub down that kind of changes angle and location based off where you are. So this right here is your camera perspective viewer. What it does is it says, hey, there are 3 points. So you can really see it right here. There are 3 points that it's connected to. And it's using those 3 points to generate the perspective of that target. This target right here is what we're going to put our image, our video, or our text on. So I'm going to go ahead and create one here on this hole, because I'm going to hide that with a picture. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see they highlight. And then I'm going to right click on it, and you can create a solid. Now, if you don't click on them and just right click, you can also do the same thing. So I'm going to create a solid, which will automatically generate a solid. This is the step where you want to create as many of these as you think you might need. You can always go back just by clicking on this camera tracker. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and make 3. So I'm going to put one here. I'm going to put one probably here. Let's do maybe here. I'm going to create another solid. And then I'll put one down here. Maybe somewhere here. Create another solid. So I now have 3 places I can put a picture, a video, or a text. Now, if you're going to do text with this method, when you right click, instead of doing that solid, you'll just do a text. It's the only difference. So I now have these 3 different parts here. So what I'm going to do is on this first track solid one, this first one I made, in order to change this from being just a solid color to being an image of our choosing, what we have to do is we have to pre-compose this solid. So I'm just going to right click on the solid I want to pre-compose. And there's a pre-compose button. Pretty much what it means to pre-compose is say, hey, let's make a new composition. So it's a new composition, but it's inside a composition already made. So it's a pre-made composition inside of a comp that you've already made. So I'm going to call this right track. You can call this whatever you like. And then all I'm going to do in order to change what this looks like is I'm going to double click so I can dive inside of it. And I'm actually just going to delete that tracked solid. Now I can come over here and put one of my images or other videos inside of here. So for right now, I'm going to do one of my cats. Let's do this one. I told you I have a couple pictures of my cat in here. It doesn't matter that this isn't scaled properly, because when we go back to our main composition, it will be scaled properly. So in my right track pre-compose, you can see she's kind of cropped. This doesn't matter too much in here. You can change things. It's not going to change too much. But once we go back to our abandoned red brick building camera track composition, you can see my scale is now back. She's a nice big picture from here. But she's absolutely massive compared to this wall, right? I want her to be kind of small and actually fit on the wall a little bit better. So in order to do this, all we have to do is come into our transform section here. And I'm just going to scale her down quite a bit. You can see she's kind of cropped here. Now we can come back here to our right track, pre-compose, and change her scale here. Pop back here, and her scale is now fixed. You want to get the scale of your pre-compose before you start fixing things in your actual pre-composed layer. That way you can make sure what you want to be seen will actually be seen here. So now, there's only a couple little things I want to do to this. I do want to rotate it so it looks like it's a little bit more in perspective. I might need to scale it a little bit. I might need to shift it around on this axis a little. And now if I hit play, she stays attached to that wall. It looks like she's just kind of this floating picture on there. everybody with me? Does anyone have questions? Yours is in play. Let's take a look. Your playback's just a little doing something. So long as it scrubs, you're good. It's when it doesn't scrub, that's the problem. All right, so let's take a look at one of these other solids here. So I'm going to do this middle one. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this track solid one. This darker blue, that middle one. And I'm going to right click on that and pre-compose this one. I'm going to call this middle track. Again, you can call this whatever you like. I'm again going to dive in there, delete this track solid. But instead of using one of these other pictures I have in here, I'm actually going to use this other MOV I gave you, because you can actually track video. So I know I only want this little hanging lantern that I have hanging outside my house. And when I come back to that abandoned building, you can see I've got this here. Now let's say for this middle track, I need to scale this down a little bit. Maybe I need to unlink my scale, which is that little chain link there. Maybe I need the top to be a little smaller. Maybe it needs to be a little thinner, a little shorter. Maybe I need to rotate it just a hair so it sits in that perspective a bit better. Depending on what you need to do, you might have to change some of these settings. Now, what we can also do in here with this track is when we have this pre-composed layer selected, we can come up here to our shape or pen tools and create a mask just like we did with Premiere. So if I click on this, I just clicked and held, went to ellipse tool. I'm just going to click and drag over this little video here. And now I have a tracked mask inside of here. So I now have a picture, a little video that's been masked. Now for this third one, we're going to do something very similar, except I'm going to change my axis a little bit here so it's pointed a little bit more diamond-like. And I'm going to take this track solid and I'm going to pre-compose it. I'm going to call this left track. And instead of getting rid of this shape, I'm going to leave it. And I'm just going to grab the star tool and make a star mask. Open this up. Move my mask. Come on. So I've got a little star here. I'm going to dive into this a little bit. And instead of changing this track solid to be a different image, I'm actually going to leave it this solid. And I'm just going to add a new solid to it. And I'm going to change its color. And then inside of this one as well, I'm going to add another star. So there's a smaller star, another star, another star. And when I go back you can see my mask that I have here has that star inside it. So I might need to shift these around a little bit to get them to show up. But you can put shapes inside of shapes inside of shapes. It's just neat. So what would happen now, if I hit play, is I have my image tracked to this wall, a little video with a mask tracked to this wall, and I have a shape with a shape inside of it. Now with this shape, we can also come over here and hit this toggle and switch mode and change this to make it change just like how we did inside of Photoshop when we made that bowling pin be on the wall. So if I wanted to take this to lighten or screen, you'll see it changes how it interacts with the wall itself. So if I change it to overlay, it almost looks like it's put onto the wall a little bit. Same with like vivid light or multiply. So these are just different ways to track something to your camera motion. So it's still placing on an object, but we're tracking the motion from the camera, not an object. Does anyone have any questions about this at all? This is neat, right? This is kind of cool. So let's try this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to make a new composition right down here with this little new comp button. And I'm going to call this motion track. We're going to be tracking a motion and not a camera. I'm going to tell it OK. And I'm going to drag that hanging lantern that I gave for you guys. So this is a little hanging lantern. I've already color corrected this, made it look a little bit more dreary, a little bit more interesting. And what we're going to do is when I hit play on this one, mute it. It's just this little lantern that I have hanging out on my front porch that swings a little bit in the wind. Now, if we were going to track this, we would want something to be sitting maybe here or around it, either describing what's happening, or maybe we have someone's shirt and they're kind of like moving back and forth and you want to track a new image on top of their shirt. Or maybe they're kind of tilting their head back and forth and you want to put something like little alien ears or something on top of their head. We can track motion from an object. The most important part of tracking motion from an object, though, is it needs to be a high contrast area that doesn't overlap with something else. So if we take a look here, one of the reasons I picked this for you guys is because it has this little tiny candelabra part inside it that's very high contrast compared to all of its surrounding areas. This is much better than saying maybe using like this little point here where there's not much contrast at all. So we could use maybe this little dark space here on the flower, this dark space on the flower, or this high contrast area between the concrete, this little piece, and that glass. So this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this little point for my track, but definitely keep in mind you can use a darker contrast like here or over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back down here to this tracker, and instead of hitting track camera, we're going to hit track motion. But the most important part of tracking motion is it's based off of where you are on your timeline. So I need to make sure, again, that I'm back at the beginning, because when we hit track motion, what it's going to do is say, hey, where are we going to be tracking and for how long? So when I hit track motion, this new layer pops up, and it's going to ask, where would you like to track your point from? So currently it is set to the middle point anchor of our image or our video. And I want to just take this little thing and make sure I have that standard move tool, but also it has little crosshair arrows with it. I want to make sure I click this, and you'll get kind of, when you click and drag it, you'll get kind of a super zoomed in version of your video. And I just want to move this so it's kind of on this corner of this little candelabra piece. Now, if you need to, you can always make this a bit larger, so it has a larger area to track. But keep in mind, you want to keep it small enough that it's not going to get confused over what's happening. So I'm actually going to make mine a little wider, but I'm going to keep it so it's underneath these little flower petal pieces. Now, if you're using something like this point here, you also want to make sure it's nice and tight. But if you're going to use something like this bigger part, you might have to make it quite larger. So we've got my little track point in a nice spot. And all we're going to do now is say, hey, there's a couple of other things in here we're going to need. So I'm going to go back to our motion track. And I'm going to go ahead and right click and create a new text. And I'm going to call this flowers, just because there's flowers here. You can call it like candle holder. You can call it, I don't know. You can call this neat, whatever kind of word you like. You can also, instead of using text, use one of the images that you've found online. I'm just going to move this where I think it's going to be most interesting, probably around here, maybe a little bit below or to the side. And I'm also going to create a new null. So a new null object. And this null, I'm just going to move to its little anchor point to where I tracked. So again, I just made this flowers. I made a null. You can also use an image for this, but I'm going to use this text. And then back in that layer, hanging candle motion track. Again, we're going to make sure we're still at the beginning of our timeline. And in our tracker section, we're going to make sure we've got our MOV or video file selected. And we're just going to hit this little play button here. So it's just going to analyze each frame. So it might sputter a little bit, get a little slow, to see what the motion of that specific spot is doing. Now, if you notice, mine is stuck pretty well to that point. If you notice it's starting to slip or shift around, you might have to do more than one tracker or erase your tracker and start over. So I can hit reset and it'll be like, nope, let's start over. So I'm going to move this back down here. And I'm going to reanalyze it. It's not going to do anything because I'm at the end. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to move my tracker again. Hit play. And you can see it's stuck pretty well on that little spot. When it slips, you'll notice it kind of shifts away from that spot you've tracked. It might come back. It might get further away. If you're having that issue, you might just need to find a different port to track, or you might need to use a different clip. But normally it's just changing the size and scale of this tracker point. And once you get this nice kind of tracked motion, you can scrub through, you can see it's following that motion. You just want to come over here to edit target. What edit target does is says, hey, where am I going to put this tracking info? What's going to be using it? How's it going to be moving? So I'm going to take this to that null, because remember, anytime we want to do anything inside of After Effects, whether it be camera, tracking, anything like that, taking it to a null is the safest bet, because if we change anything about that null, it won't change our tracking data and it won't shift it around. So I'm going to take it to this null right here, and I'm just going to say, okay. And before that null can see that tracking data, all you have to do is hit the apply button. Like so. It'll be like, hey, what dimensions do you want? X and Y, pretty good. You can also change it to X only or Y only. For us, X and Y is going to work great. And you can see this track point now created all these different little points here inside of our clip. And if we open up our null, you see that its position is also keyframed on every frame based off of this track point. So if I hit play, nothing happens to my flowers, right? My text here doesn't move. To get our flowers to match with this null, we have to take the curly Q to the null. So now our text should shift with that null. That's pretty neat, right? Did it work? Any questions? Did it do anything weird for those of you at home in the Ouija board? Okay. So this is cool. Your homework is apparently not on D2L like I thought it was. So bear with me. Is this. So you're going to be doing another 5x5, except it's not a 5x5, it's a 3x5. So you're going to have 3 clips that are 5 seconds long that have some sort of tracking in them. It can be camera tracking, it can be an object tracking, it can be both, it can be one or the other all the way through. You may definitely reuse the same footage that you used for your 5x5 or your 5x5 split. However, if you're looking at your footage and you're like, none of this footage is going to work for tracking, or I really don't want to do that, you can still go and re-edit or reshoot footage. If you notice you're having problems with it, that's fine. Tracking is either really easy or really hard. There's kind of not an in-between. Depends on what you're doing, depends on your clip, depends on your color correction. And because of that, I am giving you quite a while to work on this. This is actually going to be due for you guys. I want to make sure this date is correct. It is not. Yeah, I was gonna say this isn't gonna give you anything. So you have a bit of time to work on this. What you need to do is either, again, track a moving object or a point that a camera shifts around. Use your tracking dots and points, those little crosshair X's. And all 3 clips must include either a tracked image or a text. You can then take them into Premiere, compile them each. You can compile them all in After Effects, whichever pipeline works best for you to get these 3 in their own little thing. You may definitely use transitions and music for this.
So 5 second long, 3 clips.
So instead of having 5-second clips with tracking, it's 3 with 5.
Okay, I'm halfway.
You're good. And then just in case you forget, I do have at the beginning of your sequence, include that 2 seconds of black, 5 seconds of your title, 1 second of black, your 3 5-second tracked edits, and then 1 second of black at the end. Do make sure you're color correcting, stabilizing, all that stuff. I do still want to hear your natural sound, but you can include music over top of it. You can include, you know, all sorts of stuff that you might think you might need for this. Just bear in mind copyright when you're making this. Questions? Now, the reason I'm giving you an extra day or 2 for this, so you do have this Friday, and all of next week as lab days, is because tracking is difficult. And if you do want to reshoot anything, it gives you an extra day for that. I will be on Zoom or in this lab during class times for this one, because I do understand that sometimes tracking, when I show you how to do it, can be easy, and then you go home and the magnets in the door erase everything in your brain, that sort of thing. So I will be around if you have questions or problems. Questions or problems, fears now? If you don't have anything, you may leave if you wish. That is all for today.
Have a good day. Have a good day.
See you.
After you did the null object, how did you